Hey, welcome back to the Build It Basement. Today we're on episode number 14 of our VORON 2.4 build, and we're jumping right into electronics. We're actually going to be working on the underbelly of the beast, so let's get into it. So I guess first things first, we'll talk about where we left off last time. Did live stream on the last video. Let me do this real quick. There we go. So we finished belting up the VORON, got that all done, got everything tensioned up pretty well. A couple clamps would have been helpful when I did it, side mention. I used some boxes, but basically to get the gantry where it needed to be, attached everything up. And today we are now working on the bottom. We're going to skip over the LCD module, we're going to skip over these things. They're pretty self-explanatory. If you want to see what those look like, I can show you real quick. Let me grab them just so we have them. So there's your LCD module put together already in advance. The only odd thing about this is getting your heat inserts on the inside of these pieces on the back side here. And I just did them by putting them in sideways. Basically soldering iron sideways on it and carefully kind of push those in best I could sideways. So basically boom, like that, as opposed to trying to do up and down. Definitely not going to be able to give them that way. But pretty easy to put that together. And there's our power on the back of the unit. Everything snaps in. One minor upgrade I made. Oh, I'm just going to do this because I love the sound of this. Oh, it's snapping right in. Kit from FORMBOT came with the Ethernet keystone. It did not come with anything else. The only thing came with a blank, but you can print a blank. But I added a USB, so I went ahead and purchased some USB keystones right from Amazon. You can get them in a bunch of different places. But basically, that will give me a USB connection on the back of the unit to either connect directly to, or probably to connect directly to the Raspberry Pi for either additional memory or storage or something else in the future. It's there. I got it if I need it. I'll see. So we're skipping over this stuff because there's not much to talk about, not much to do on them. And we're not attaching this stuff. These are the bottom pieces, basically your fan, your skirting around the unit, things like that. I don't want to add those on just yet, simply because if I do add those on, it's going to make it more difficult to work with. I want to get my bottom components installed, then I'm going to do my wiring. I am doing my wiring from scratch. I am not purchasing a wiring loom. As of right now, who knows, everything might go sideways and I might do that anyways, but I plan on wiring it all myself. I mean, it's really not that many wires. I mean, I got hours into this, so I might as well put the hours into the rest of it and do it 100% and use the kit for what it's worth. Why not, right? So, skipping over the skirting, skipping over mounting the power module on the back. Fun note here, this is the drawing that's provided with the kit. I don't believe they provide a different one, nope. So this, I believe, is a variant. Obviously, the one I have is a little bit different than what you saw on the screen. Let's see if I have a screen. So on mine, I have the keystones on the left and right, kind of flanking the power in the power switch and the fuse unit. On this one that they show in the manual, it's basically power and switch without any additional things on there. That one is included in the STLs, but I think the one I printed is a little bit better, honestly. So electronics cooling, we're going to skip over that for now. We don't have any electronics that's cool yet. And like I said, I think it's just going to get in the way until we actually get some stuff mounted on the bottom. So putting the panels on it, again, skipping over that. I will loop back around, so don't think I'm going to leave you out to dry on those things. I'm just in order of what we're doing, I think we need to hold off on those things until we get to a point where we can actually do them. So we're still scrolling, and eventually, here we go. So this is the suggested setup for where to mount things on the base of the Voron, the underbelly. Show you what we're working with here on mine. That right there. I don't really have a good camera to show that view, so I'm using my movable camera here, so it's not quite as good as some of the other cameras I have, but I think it'll work for this. So we got our 2 DIN rails. We have I'll see, this is the back of the unit, so this would be the top DIN rail. That would be the further rear DIN rail, the front DIN rail. Just to put everything in perspective, if I take this camera and move it around, you can see our gantry and our inductive probe right here. So that is the angle I am working with. So let's get back to this. So what we're working with mounting, and we're going to go from big to small. We got our mean well here, our 24-volt power supply, and this is going to get mounted. Well, they show it kind of getting mounted in a, let's see, it's going to be tough to go back and forth. Kind of like this. So I'm going to mount things as they show them in the picture, just to start off with. But before we mount anything, we actually have to get things ready to mount. So in the STLs, in the Voron, we'll call it the digital kit. I like that phrase, right? There are mounts for nearly everything. The FORMBOT kit came with a separate mount for the solid state relay, so we're going to use that because, again, it came with the kit. Although there's also one of these. Which one was it? I'm going to put it aside. There's already a clamp made to mount that. So the way that these clamps work, actually I'll use that one, is basically you have a printed spring. So when you go to install this, you are basically going to clip the underside on the spring side on the bottom of the DIN, and then pull it up and over to the other one, and then it will retract itself back on. I'll show you what that looks like real quick here. So again, spring, the spring movable part, we'll call it. It's going to go on, push it up a little bit till you get the clip over, and there you go. Now, they can move a little bit, they'll slide, but it's not going to come off. So you can get lateral movement on it, but you're not actually going to get to be able to pull that off. To pull it back off, all you really need to do is put tension on it, lean it forward, comes out. Works pretty nice. All right, so let's get this stuff mounted. Let's see here. And I gotta look at the manual real quick. Let's bring you guys back with me. So the first thing they're mounting is what I believe is their SKR. Now my kit came with a spider, so the mount's slightly different, but the procedure is pretty much the same. So with that, why don't we get that going? As far as I know, FORMBOT sends out what they have most available. Last I checked, they're still sending out the spiders. You could argue what's better or what's worse. There has been some issues with the spider boards, specifically as far as I've read with capacitance, I guess. It seems that the boards may be holding on a little bit too much power. Doesn't want to sit in there just right. Anyways, holding on to a little bit too much power and causing some headaches in terms of when you hook things up. So I'll get more into that when we get closer to that, but for now let's just get the stuff mounted. All right. I think these holes printed a little bit small, so we're going to not be able to pre-insert them like I like to do. We'll just float them right in. There we go. And I'm mounting these from the back side. This is the back of the board, the one with the clips on it. I don't want any metal on the other side. Even though I get some spacers, they're actually going in here as well. The less chances we are to have a short circuit of a board, the better. Anybody could agree with that. So we're going to get these 4 heat sets in. And then we'll move forward from there. So there's really not a lot going into the back here. I mean, we got a lot of space to work with, which is great. And I'm doing this before I actually run any wiring, mostly because everything I'm going to do is going to be custom lengthed exactly to this machine build. And I need to know where everything's going to be to do that. So there's our mount for the spider to the DIN, and the way that that mounts is using the spacers. So the actual manual for the SKR is slightly different. It actually shows you using some M2 by 10 self-tapping screws and then going into one of these guys. But this already has those built into it, so we don't need them. But if you are doing an SKR, if you do get an SKR, that's what you're going to be doing on there. And then you can use some M3 by 8s to mount the actual board to the mount itself. On mine, I am using some M3 by 12s because the 8s are not long enough to make it through the board, the spacer, and then into the heat inserts. So, all right, so we have that, and then we're going to flip this around to the back side. So on these are texture side, but the side that does not have the clamping mechanism on it. And this should line up, hopefully. Let's get these started. One there. One there. One there. And last but not least, that one. All right. Now let's get them tightened up. So there we go. That's number 1. So for right now, we'll just clamp that on around about where I think it's going to wind up. Which is, see if I had to guess, backside. Most of my stuff is going to come off that, so we'll put it right about there. Nice and clamped on there. All right, and back to the manual we go. And now they are mounting the Raspberry Pi. They even put the, that's interesting. They put the the manufacturer, Mechatronics art on the Ethernet port. It looks like the Ethernet port, but it's not. It's actually inverted. Oh, I see what's going on here. The drawing is showing a Raspberry Pi. I believe that's it. What is that? Is that a 2? What is that? That is... What is that drawing? That is not a 3B, I can tell you that. And I don't have another one here to... Oh no, this came with a 4. That is a 3B. Okay, so drawing showing a 3B. The kit came... I'm actually kind of surprised. The kit came with a Raspberry Pi 4. It is the 2 gig version, which should be plenty. There are other issues, just so you know, you might think, because there is a 4 gig version of the Raspberry Pi 4, but there are some issues, some underlying issues with the 4 gig version. I don't recall off the top of my head what they are, but I do know that they can cause you some headaches. And I wish I could, I mean, you can look them up. Just be certain if you do want to go with a 4 gig Raspberry Pi, you buy a Raspberry Pi 4 and you go with a 4 gig, be certain that those stipulations don't impact you. I ran into that with a home assistant, home automation system. There's some issues there that can cause you some headaches, so be aware of that. But okay, so ours came with a Pi 4. That's showing us with a Pi 3B. So mount on that is very similar. Actually, this is exactly the same as far as I can tell. Let's get to that. So on this we have our base mount, which has legs that stick up slightly to pad itself from the Raspberry Pi, and then we have the actual clamp to clamp it to the DIN rail. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is using the self-tappers to connect these two together. That's M2 by 10s. Let's grab some of them. Haven't been using too many of these. So 2 M2 by 10s. And this is plastic to plastic, so keep that in mind. These guys are pretty long for this. Oops. Helpful if I put it on the right way, huh? These screws are actually pretty long for the purpose. And that's part of the kit probably, but I think they'll work just fine, even if they do extend a little bit beyond, because we are on DIN rails. So there's a little bit of a buffer there. So, get this going. So it's nice that the kit comes, or the digital files come with all these mounts. There are bunches of ways that you can mount the DIN rails. There are additional files that you can find either from manufacturers directly or on GitHub or Thingiverse or any other place you look for. If you do want to mount these slightly differently, some of them will allow you to mount things in opposite directions of how they are in these. So if you do have a need to do something different, you're not left out in the cold. There are options. So, and then we're using some M2 by 10 self-tappers for that as well. The spider board that I'm using actually comes with a power out for the Raspberry Pi, so I can power it directly from the board. However, the FORMBOT kit came with a 5-volt DC power converter. It's another Meanwell, it looks like a pretty decent little build. It's a nice little unit. It's got some heft to it, so I'm going to use that. Raspberry Pi itself doesn't really use that much power. I think it's under 3 amps if I recall correctly. So you could definitely get away with using probably what's on that Spider board. But again, the kit came with the Meanwell, so I'm going to go out on a limb and figure that that dedicated power supply is going to be a little bit more robust, probably have a little bit cleaner power out of it, less ripple, those types of things. So we'll use that. If you didn't catch the last stream I actually did a live stream. With some Q&A in there about where we are so far. Basically nothing too major out of the question, or any, I should say, any major issues with the FORMBOT kit. A couple small things here and there, you know, such as the motors having pre-cabled wiring, not the wiring harnesses, but being pre-cabled. Minor things. Pretty happy with the kit in general. It is my first full 3D printer build. I am taking my time. I probably could have this thing together if I could dedicate a couple days. I'd say probably 2 days, 3 days. Not taping, of course, because it adds about 800% of the time. So there's a Raspberry Pi. And let's get that on there as well. Where did they show that? They show it. Well, they show that board over there. I'm going to put my Raspberry Pi over here. Around about there. So basically we have our air quote low voltage stuff down there so far. All right, next. We have our power supplies. So there are these self tappers here. Kit came with 2 Meanwell supplies. Both of them are pretty nice. Definitely no issues with those at all. But like I said a few minutes ago, this is a lot more hefty. I think it's going to be, if nothing else, cleaner or have cleaner power than we'll get out of the board directly. So we're going to use it. We have it. We might as well. That is getting mounted with a single mount, and that is being screwed in with some M3x8s. Grab those. Go on that one, and then let's see here. How are they positioning this? They're showing it like that with terminals on this side on the drawing. So our little leggies, technical term, are going to be facing outwards, one towards the terminals and the other towards the opposite side. And those are M4x6s. I don't recall seeing M4x6s. M4x6s. M3 by 6. M3 by 6. I have to get into another bag of tricks. Five. Oh, look at that. Just when I think they forgot something, we got our M4x6s. I'm kind of surprised. Didn't even see the bag. So, for these guys, get those out, put those away. Assume those are going to be extra. Put my backup supply away. And get this attached. So, it's been about a week since I put out a video. I did go on vacation. I went camping with the family. Had a lot of fun. I've been doing some other things as well. My current printer in the house is an Ender 5 with a micro Swiss hot end, and way off the track here in terms of what we're talking about, but I decided to play with polycarbonate, and this is just a random shape I got on Thingiverse. This is a rocket egg holder. Don't ask. But I wanted something that basically had some overhang on it, prints like that, and also had some things on here so I could kind of judge how structurally strong it was. But so I've been able to print polycarbonate now with the Ender 5. The reason I'm doing that is so I can print my, grab this real quick, print my hot sections. That's right here. My hot sections for this VORON build out of polycarbonate, which is what this is. So kind of impressed. It took quite a few tries and some tweaking. If you have questions about that, go ahead and hit me up. I could do a materials video at some point, but that worked out pretty well. It's not the cleanest or the nicest looking print ever, but the overhangs are there, there's no stringing, everything's there, it's nice. The holes actually line up and they're the proper size, so everything works out. And I'll tell you what, polycarbonate is harder and tougher than I would have ever thought. I knew it was a strong material, I knew it was heat resistant, but really strong. Alright, so let's get these guys mounted, but look at that. Let's see where they're showing these guys going. Alright, top and bottom. Let's see here. So this is going to take this 5 volt mean well is still taking in 100 to 240 volt AC and converting it down. So I'm going to use my top rail for my air quote high voltage section and my lower rail for the lower voltage section. So that being said, we'll put this guy up here, and the box, actually let me just take that off real quick. The box, it is set for 230 volts, so we're going to want to switch that to 115. So that's a switch on there, if you didn't know. If you do it at 230, it's probably not going to blow anything up, but everything's going to act a little weird because it's not going to work. So we got that on, and we're going to put this guy on as well. And let's actually, in order to keep all of our high voltage stuff in that direction up there. These also come with, just take that back off. Show that real quick. Power supplies in general, just so you can see, tend to come with a pot or potentiometer. That's to adjust the voltage that comes out of this. So when we get to actually doing our wiring, before we turn anything on, I'm going to, and I suggest you put a multimeter on your voltage out to see that it is within 5% of what you're expecting. If you're expecting 12 volts and you wind up with, 12 and a half, 13 volts, you're probably fine. If you have 5 volts and you wind up with 5.25, you're probably fine. But if you're expecting 5 volts and you have 7, 8 volts, something like that, you could be off. And this will probably do anywhere from about 3.5 to, I'm going to guess, 8 or 9 volts pretty easily. So you're going to want to probably check that. It's probably overkill, but if you put this much work into something, you might as well check it, right? All right, so get that on just like that. So 24 volt, 5 volt, Raspberry Pi, and our Spider so far. And I'm going to actually slide that a little bit further because we are missing one major component here. The guy's a little loose. I don't know why. Press that spring a little bit. I got an idea. I'm going to hit that with a little bit of heat for a second. Let me see if I can press that spring a little bit. Just putting a little bit of downward tension on it while I heat it up. So my finger feels like it's getting a little bit too hot. You'll hold that. Basically just putting some compression on that spring, letting it cool off. Wish it would cool off quicker. Alright, we'll let that sit there for a minute. Hopefully it will memorize that where it's at right now. While we're waiting for that, let's go ahead and we have our solid state relay, our SSR, and the FORMBOT kit did come with this mount. It's a little bit different looking, but very hefty, very nice, or at least I think it's nice. It's going to get mounted much the same way everything else has. So basically we're looking at, actually how are we looking at doing this, because is that threaded? Yeah, okay, so the black mounting bracket is threaded. I just don't know what size screw that is. We'll see if it's an M3 real quick. Looks a little biggish for an M3. Nope, it's not an M3. And maybe it's an M4. That looks a little bit more appropriate. Let's see. It is an M4. Okay, so we'll use an M4, 2 M4 screws to mount that. Hey, bud. Going to bed?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. All right, so we'll get this mounted. How's it look?
Complicated.
Complicated?
Yes.
Yeah? You know what this is?
No.
Power supply. You know what that is?
No.
It's a computer. The Raspberry Pi.
I feel like it's weird that it's called that though.
You think it's weird that it's called a Raspberry Pi?
Yeah.
Yeah? This is the controller for the whole printer. Crazy, huh?
Well, the controller isn't right there. The screen is up there.
Well, it's not a screen. That's the electronics behind the screen. The screen actually plugs into this.
Oh.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Actually made me think of something. Now that I'm thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Probably gonna move some stuff around, but we'll get to that. All right, so this has had plenty of time. Going up. All right, have a good night. This has had plenty of time to cool off, so let's see if we can get that to stick a little bit better now. Oh yeah, much better. My son made me realize or think that our screen's going to be up here. So it makes no sense to be running my cabling for the screen module across my power supply. So I'm already thinking that we are going to make a move. So, might as well do it. Something like that. And put this back down here. All right. You know what? That trick I used with the hot air, a little bit weary of doing it here on the Raspberry Pi, but we should be okay. I'm going to go ahead and heat up that spring again on this component. Kind of compress that. We'll let that set. While that's happening, that was just a little loose. So basically, heating up that spring while you're pushing it in, basically resets or sets the memory of that plastic. So it's always going to want to go to the state that it was in when it was heated. So basically, it's going to be tighter, is what I'm saying. So this guy is going to mount like so, and it's going to, well, we'll be able to mount it either way, so I guess that doesn't matter. So let's see if we can get that screw down there. Do this by hand. That barely wants to fit through there. All right. So there's that. This will have the same issue. Get that like that. And this is basically metal to metal, so get a little bit of an extra spin. Good to go. And let's see if we, let's see here, load in, okay, so loads that way. So that puts all of our high voltage stuff on that side, on the bottom, towards the back of the unit, this being the back. And then all of our other electronics here up towards the front. Yeah, I think I like that. And that's a lot stiffer now too. One of these two guys nearer to each other, something like that. And I don't think there's any wrong way or right way of where you put your components on the bottom. It's just whatever's most sensible. My choice for putting things this way, just as a little recap here, putting our high voltage stuff towards the back because that is where our power is going to be coming in. So basically our power module or panel will be right here, with power feeding directly into our mean well, both of them. So probably go from here to there. And depending on how I wire, I'm either going to double terminal there or to double crimp a wire in here. And then we also have power going into our solid state relay. So that's going to come in to there. And then from there, we have our 5 volts, which will feed our Raspberry Pi off of this power supply, and everything else is going to come off of here to feed our our bed, our steppers, and anything else that goes along with that. So let's see where we're at. We've got that, we've got that, we've got that, and they're showing that, and they're getting into the wiring. So that's what we're going to call for this episode. It's really quick, really simple. Just a little bit of information as to, a little thought as to where I'm placing things on the bottom. Getting back after about a week of putting out videos, so I want to do something quick, short, easy. Next video, we're going to actually start on some of the actual physical wiring. We'll start with the mains power, going from the input to the power supplies and to the solid state relay. We're going to talk a little bit more about the steppers and the drivers. Probably going to do a video about crimping in general. And routing wires. I'm not going to build the whole harness live on video. It would be very boring. If you found this a little tedious, then you would find that extremely tedious. So either way, hopefully you catch me on the next video, and that will be episode number 15 of the VORON build, going page by page on the manual. If you haven't subscribed, I would appreciate it if you do. We're at $1.99 after about a month and a half, almost 2 months now. So looking for that last guy, whoever number 200 is, or gal. Thank you, and I will see you next time.